So I can and I will judge the Abrahamic God and the Bible the same way that I would judge Allah in the Quran or Krishna in the Vedas. It is not sufficient to be believed in, and it is nowhere near close to moral perfection that I should emulate. Welcome to Mindshift, I'm Brandon, and I'm really excited about today's video and the fact that I can now do these shorter videos. For those of you that didn't know, on my previous channel, Brandon's Bookshelf, where I covered all things book related, I was dabbling into what I called Sunday school videos, where we talked about all things atheism, agnosticism, skepticism, etc. I had 10 videos over there, and I just felt like I couldn't upload 2 or 3 per week without annoying my book audience. So I've created this channel. This is one of the first videos out on this channel, and I'm excited just to be able to pop on and throw up a video whenever I want. So if you still haven't subscribed, please do so. Turn on notifications, engage with me in the comments. There will be at least 2 or 3 new videos every single week. So what is today's video and how did it come about? Well, I am getting inundated on my phone now with all kinds of videos that are essentially saying the opposite of what I have been saying, from Christian apologetics, etc. And I found a video just the other day that was by Mike Winger, Why You're So Bad at Judging God. And I thought, okay, let's hear it. His metaphor, I thought, did not work. And his reasoning that he gave at the end, I thought, was not only wrong, but harmful. So I want to have a chance to address it and give myself the opportunity to talk about why we should judge God. Not just why we can, why we have the right to, why we should, and why we have a duty to. So before we get into all of my thoughts, let's look at this video. It's just a short, so under a minute, and then we'll come back and dive into it.
Me and my wife like watching cooking shows, and we were watching Iron Chef. One of the complaints about Iron Chef was you have these incredible chefs cooking, but frequently the judges, it'll be like 1 or maybe 2 real food critics who know food, and then it'll be like an actor or like some random famous person. And they'll look at the food and they'll judge it poorly. Now the chefs are incredibly skilled and they make it really well. And then I've seen people look at the food and they go, oh, well, it's just kind of weird to me, you know? The producers of the show should have known better. Like somebody should have been like, hey, you're not in a place where you're informed enough to make a proper judgment about this issue.
So, I mean, I get it. I had this thought just the other day. I don't want to embarrass myself, but I was watching Ink Master. I love tattoos. I love the art of it. And every once in a while on Ink Master, they bring on a guest judge, like someone who just has a bunch of tattoos. Just like this example here, someone famous that likes to eat or considers themselves a foodie, but may not actually have the required skill set to judge properly. And I totally get that, because this person will come in and they're just like, well, that tattoo I really like, I would wear that. It's like, that's not what the competition is. So I get what he's saying, but stretching that. So the analogy here is that God is the chef making this amazing dish, the world, us, reality, space, time, etc. And I'm the feeble judge who has no right critiquing his dish. Except that the correct version of this analogy would not be me being the judge, it would be me being the food. I am the creation. I am the end goal of what God designed, or at least part of it. And I can look around me at the other things like me, look at humankind, for example, look at the construction of our bodies, look at the uninhabitability of our planet and our world, and say, hey, this could have been done better. I absolutely can say that. And we're not just going off me or humankind. God wrote down his recipe. He wrote down his cookbook and he gave it to us to examine. And if I'm reading that recipe and I find errors and misspellings and contradictions and bad translations, etc., from a cookbook that claims to be perfect, if it said 2 eggs, it meant 2 eggs. But on the next page for the same exact dish, it used 6 eggs, we have an issue. And if I follow the recipe exactly and I don't get the desired outcome of the dish, then I can say there's something flawed with the recipe. I'm going to stop trying to stay on metaphor or on analogy here and just speak candidly now about why I think we can judge God. But he goes on to say something else, and I want to hold that to the side as well as we get into the topics.
Me too, when I evaluate and look at the world, I'm not in a place to make an informed and right judgment on God, on how he's running things. Not in my knowledge, I don't know enough. Not in my wisdom, I don't understand things well enough, even the things I do know. And not in my perspective.
First of all, should we attribute this to anything that claims to be supernatural? Do I not have the right to make judgments against other things that have claimed existence? What about all things paranormal? Should we just not investigate if ghosts are real simply because someone said they were real? And now they know something we don't about the world of the unliving, and who am I as a living person to critique that? That doesn't make any sense. What about other gods or other religions? There's plenty of other holy books that claim plenty of other gods, all that have more power than we do and have established themselves as the creators of the universe universe, which means they would know more than we. Do we just not have the right to examine those claims to see, first of all, if indeed they are who they say they are? See, the problem that Mike is making is he's starting with the presumption that God is real and that the Bible is true. And of course he is, considering his belief system. But to come in after those two facts and say, hey, within this very specific framework that I have already claimed as perfect truth, you would not have the right to judge God. I'm not sure I even agree with that. Like, if a being is smarter and more powerful, that just means they're above reproach. I don't know where we get this idea. Let's break it down into a different analogy. Let's use my children and me. I am way more powerful than my children. I am way smarter than my children. I have life experience they simply do not have. I do things they don't understand sometimes, like take them to the dentist, and that actually causes them pain. But I know, because of my further intelligence over them, that this is actually a good thing for them, and I'm doing this because I love them. This dentist example is something that often gets brought up in these conversations about how God knows better, and what looks like trouble might not actually be trouble. There might be a good cause for it, and it works up into a limit. But what if just randomly I go and I hit my children? Do they not have a right to question me, to think it through and see if they did anything that deserved that kind of retribution? Or should I just tell them this is right? I mean, essentially this claim boils down to might makes right, and I think it's disgusting. And in a lot of cases, the children never do question the parent who is abusive because of the power dynamic there. And to not question God because of that same power dynamic is akin to you being an abused child that's too afraid to question daddy. It's wrong. God is not above reproach, specifically because God makes claims on who he is, and we should then be able to test his claims against his actions as told by himself in his own words and render a judgment. This to me is just beyond simple. I'm going to leave you with 3 points on why we can judge God. First is because of God's moral character. Second is because of human reasoning and our ability to think at all, which supposedly he gave to us. And then third is using Jesus as the standard. So briefly, let's talk about the first one. Similar to what I already said, the reason we can judge God is because he has shown us his character in his words. So if in 1 John 4:8, God declares himself to be love, and in Deuteronomy 32:4, God declares himself just, merciful in Psalm 103:8, and faithful in 2 Timothy 2:13, we can use these as standards to evaluate against other descriptions of God in the Bible and other words and actions that he has taken to hold him accountable to his self-descriptions. So when God in 1 Samuel 15:3 orders that babies be killed during a genocide along with animals, we can look back and say, is this love? Is this just? Is this merciful? And is this faithful? I say no. And the common apologetic argument to this is, if you don't believe in God, you don't get to have a concept to right or wrong because there's no objective morality in your life. So this is just an opinion that falls completely flat for you. And fine, we can talk about objective versus subjective moral arguments at another video, but I just want to work within the Christian framework. If you say there's one true God who has an objective morality that he has laid out for us and lives out himself, then I get to judge that morality, even if I don't believe it exists. I get to judge your claim of it. And I always go to the easier examples, though there's many others, but keeping people as slaves, as property, and passing them down for all time, raping women and keeping them as sex slaves, or killing children during mass genocide, none of this is excusable to me on any level for any reason or any amount of context. So I can put those actions from God against his words about his nature and say, hey, something doesn't clash here. It's like looking at the cookbook and seeing the errors. Point 2 is about human reason. And there's really 2 points here. 1, God supposedly created us with this ability to reason, with this ability to look at things rationally, to use logic, to see if 2 plus 2 really equals 4 and be able to work that backwards. Yet so often the Christian says that his ways are higher than our ways, and that the realm of the spiritual makes no sense in the world of the scientific, of the testable, repeatable processes we would expect to see. I disagree. Again, going under the own claim that God created us in his image, that he endowed us with this gift, this ability to be able to think and absorb information and compare that over here and contrast it over here. That, if given by God, should be used for the blessing and the gift that it is. I shouldn't have to deny my faculties. I shouldn't have to reduce myself to understand God's love or wrath. And the second part of this, again, back to the Christian claim of objective morality, that there is some moral code written on our hearts that even the Gentile, as Paul says, can still see what is right and what is wrong. I can see clearly what is wrong. I know I would never want to be owned by another person and have none of the autonomy that God has indicated in other parts of the Bible he desires for us. So if God tells one group to enslave another group, I guess, again, working in the Christian framework, moral code on my heart starts going off like, hey, that doesn't make sense. That doesn't seem right. So if even to the non-believer there is this moral code we're working out of, shouldn't it apply to God's own actions? Just saying, something to think about. And then point 3, using Jesus as the standard. In John 14:7, we see that if you know me, you know the Father, Jesus speaking. So if in Matthew 25:46, Jesus is talking about the torture and eternal damnation of people, then I get to also know the Father through Jesus. The Old Testament, which a lot of people want to throw out, that doesn't have very much to do with hell at all. You've got Sheol and you have kind of this underworld where you can visit those of your past, etc., or mourn for them. You do not have the eternity. The Jews believed you just go and you sleep forever with your fathers. You don't have this torture aspect, this eternal punishment aspect until you get to Jesus. So fine, forget the Old Testament. Let's judge God off his Son, which we are told in his perfect word we can do through him, and look at Jesus's values, especially that of justice, as eternal torment. Something's going off with that moral code on my heart that God gave me. That doesn't seem right. And that's Jesus. That's not some old Levitical law. And Jesus is representative of God's own heart. So those are the 3 things I wanted to share with you briefly today to get you thinking on the topic, maybe get your mind shifting on the topic of if we can judge God, if we should judge God, if we have the right to judge God, and in my opinion, the duty to judge God, because the Abrahamic God, like all the other claimed gods, simply seems to not exist to me. And if his words and his actions can be used for both good and bad, I say throw the baby out with the bathwater. There are other secular ways to get to good, and the world is already hard enough without adhering to made-up religions that are antiquated in their morality that cause daily harm and trauma to its believers. So I can and I will judge the Abrahamic God and the Bible the same way that I would judge Allah in the Quran or Krishna in the Vedas. And the judgment is that it is not sufficient to be believed in, and it is nowhere near close to moral perfection that I should emulate. But that's it. I digress. It's hard for me to do these shorter videos. So thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. I look forward to sharing more with you. The next video that comes out will actually be one of my original 10 Sunday school videos. So make sure that you go ahead and watch that, catch up with what I was doing before I started the new channel. And in the meantime, keep thinking.